God bless you guys. Today we're going to be reading a little bit of the Great Controversy. If you have this book, you can go to page 141. And if you don't have this book, you can type it on Google and turn to page 141. Glory be to God. Very hot weather. Very, very hot weather, man. I might just turn the AC on. Actually, nah, I don't want to turn it on. It'll make too much noise. I like to read whatever I read silent like this. Glory be to God. And you guys should do the same. If you have a lot of noise in your room, try to silence that so that you can be able to focus exclusively on what you're reading. That's what I like to do. Page 141. 11 Protests of the Princes. Glory be to Jesus Christ. One of the noblest testimonies ever uttered for the Reformation was the protest offered by the Christian princes of Germany at the Diet of Spires in 1529. The courage, faith, and firmness of those men of God gained for succeeding ages liberty of thought and of conscience. Their protest gave to the Reformed Church the name of Protestant. Its principles are the very essence of Protestantism. A dark and threatening day had come for the Reformation, notwithstanding the Edict of Worms, declaring Luther to be an outlaw and forbidding the teaching or belief of his doctrines. Religious toleration had thus far prevailed in the empire. God's providence had held in check the forces that opposed the truth. Charles V was bent on crushing the Reformation, but often as he raised his hand to strike, he had been forced to turn aside the blow. Again and again, the immediate destruction of all who dared to oppose themselves to Rome appeared inevitable. But at the critical moment, the armies of the Turk appeared on the eastern frontier, or the King of France, or even the Pope himself, jealous of the increasing greatness of the emperor, made war upon him, and thus, amid the strife and tumult of nations, the Reformation had been left to strengthen and extend. All that did was extend the Reformation. All that did was strengthen it. At last, however, the papal sovereigns had stifled their I don't even know what that word means, whatever, that they might make common cause against, okay, so that could be threats, right? Threats that they might make common cause against the reformers. The Diet of Spires in 1526 had given each state full liberty in matters of religion until the meeting of a general council. But no sooner had the dangers passed, which secured this concession, than the emperor summoned a second diet to convene at Spires in 1529 for the purpose of crushing heresy. The princes were to be induced by peaceable means, if possible, to side against the Reformation, but it failed. Charles was prepared to resort to the sword. The papists were exultant. Glory be to God. They appeared at Spires in great numbers and openly manifested their hostility toward the reformers, and all who favored them said malignant, "We are the execration and the sweepings of the world, but Christ will look down on his poor people and will preserve them." Glory be to God. The evangelical princes in attendance at the Diet were forbidden even to have the gospel preached in their dwellings, but the people of Spires thirsted for the word of God and notwithstanding the prohibition, thousands flocked to the services held in the chapel of the Elector of Saxony. This hastened the crisis. An imperial message announced to the Diet that as the resolution granting liberty of conscience had given rise to great disorders, the emperor required that it be annulled. The arbitrary act excited the indignation and alarm of the evangelical Christians. Said one, Christ has again fallen into the hands of Caiaphas and Pilate. The Romanists became more violent. Glory be to God. A bigoted papist declared, the Turks are better than the Lutherans, for the Turks observe few days and the Lutherans violate them. If we must choose between the holy scriptures of God and the old errors of the church, we should reject the former, said Melanchthon. Every day in full assembly, Faber cast some new stone at us gospelers. Religious toleration had been legally established, and the evangelical states were resolved to oppose infringement of their rights. Luther, being still under the ban imposed by the Edict of Worms, was not permitted to be present at Spires, but his place was supplied by his collaborators and the princes whom God had raised up to defend his cause in this emergency. The noble Frederick of Saxony, Luther's former protector, had been removed by death, but Duke John, his brother and successor, had joyfully welcomed the Reformation, and while a friend of peace, he displayed great energy and courage in all matters relating to the interests of the faith. The priests demanded that the states which had accepted the Reformation submit implicitly to Romish jurisdiction. I gotta read that again, I'm sorry. The priests demanded that the states which had accepted the Reformation submit implicitly to Romish jurisdiction. The reformers, on the other hand, claimed the liberty which had previously been granted. They could not consent that Rome should again bring under her control those states that had, with so great joy, received the word of God. As a compromise, it was finally proposed that where the Reformation had not become established, the Edict of Worms should be rigorously enforced, and that in those where the people had deviated from it, and where they could not conform to it without danger or revolt, they should at least effect a new reform. They should touch upon no controverted point. They should not oppose the celebration of the Mass. They should permit no Roman Catholic to embrace Lutheranism. This measure passed the Diet to the great satisfaction of the Popish priests and prelates. If this edict were enforced, the Reformation could neither be extended, yet glory be to God, the Reformation could neither be extended where as yet it was unknown, nor be established on solid foundations where it already existed. Liberty of speech would be prohibited, no conversations would be allowed, and to these restrictions and prohibitions, the friends of the Reformation were required at once to submit. The hopes of the world seemed about to be extinguished. The reestablishment of the Romish hierarchy would infallibly bring back the ancient abuses, and an occasion would readily be found for completing the destruction of a work already so violently shaken by fanaticism and dissension. As the evangelical party met for consultation, one looked to another in blank dismay. From one to another passed the inquiry, what is to be done? Mighty issues for the world were at stake. Shall the chiefs of the Reformation submit and accept the edict? How easily might the reformers at this crisis, which was truly a tremendous one, have urged themselves into a wrong course? How many plausible pretexts and fair reasons might they have found for submission? The Lutheran princes were guaranteed the free exercise of their religion. The same boon was extended to all those of their subjects who, prior to the passing of the measure, had embraced the reform views. Ought not this to contend them? How many perils would submission avoid? On what unknown hazards and conflicts would opposition launch them? Who knows what opportunities the future may bring? Let us embrace peace. Let us seize the olive branch Rome holds out and close the wounds of Germany. With arguments like these, might the reformers have justified their adoption of a course which would have assuredly issued a long time in the overthrow of their cause. Happily, they looked at the principle on which the arrangement was based, and they acted in faith. What was that principle? It was the right of Rome to coerce conscience and forbid free inquiry. But were not themselves in their Protestant subjects to enjoy religious freedom? Yes, as a favor specially stipulated for in the arrangement, but not as a right. As to all outside the arrangement, the great principle of authority was to rule. Conscience was out of court. Rome was infallible judge and must be obeyed. The acceptance of the proposed arrangements have been a virtual admission that religious liberty ought to be confined to Reformed Saxony, and as to all the rest of Christendom, free inquiry in the profession of the Reformed faith were crimes, of course, and must be visited with the dungeon and the stake. Could they consent to localize religious liberty, to have it proclaimed that the Reformation had made its last convert, had subjugated its last decree, and that wherever Rome bore sway at this hour, her dominion was to be perpetuated? Could the reformers have pleaded that they were innocent of the blood of those hundreds and thousands who, in pursuance of this arrangement, have yet to yield up their lives in popish lands? Glory be to God. This would have been to betray at the supreme hour the cause of the gospel and the liberties of Christendom. Rather would they sacrifice everything, even their states, their crowns, and their lives. Let us reject this decree, said the princes. In matters of conscience, the majority has no power. The deputies declared it is to the decree of 1526 that we are indebted for the peace that the empire enjoys. Its abolition would fill Germany with troubles and divisions. The Diet is incompetent to do more than perverse religious liberty until the council meets. To protect liberty of conscience is the duty of the state, and this is the limit of its authority in matters of religion. Every secular government that attempts to regulate or enforce religious observance by civil authority is sacrificing the very principle for which the evangelical Christians so nobly struggled. The papists determined to put down what they termed daring obstinacy. They began by endeavoring to cause division among the supporters of the Reformation and to intimidate all, glory be to God, all who had not openly declared in its favor. The representatives of the free cities were at last summoned before the Diet and inquired to declare whether they would accede to the terms of the proposition. They pleaded for delay, but in vain. When brought to the test, nearly one half their number sided with the reformers. Wow. Those who thus refused to sacrifice the liberty of conscience and the right of individual judgment well knew that their position marked them for future criticism. They knew it. Condemnation and persecution. Said one of the delegates, we must either deny the word of God or be burnt. Glory be to God. Like Jerome and John Huss. Remember, we read about those two theologians. King Ferdinand, the emperor's representative at the Diet, saw that the decree would cause serious divisions unless the princes could be induced to accept it and sustain it. Glory be to God. He therefore tried the art of persuasion, well knowing that to employ force with such men would only render them the more determined. He begged the princes to accept the decree, assuring them that the emperor would be exceedingly pleased with them. But these faithful men acknowledged an authority above that authority above that of earthly rulers, and they answered calmly, "We will obey the emperor and everything that may contribute to maintain peace and the honor of God." In the presence of the diet, the king at last announced to the elector and his friends in the edict was about to be drawn up in the form of the imperial decree, and that their only remaining course was to submit to the majority. Having thus spoken, he withdrew from the assembly, giving the reformers opportunity for deliberation or reply. To no purpose, they sent a deputation entreating the king to return to their glory be to God. Remonstrances, he answered only, "It is settled affairs. Submission is all that remains. Glory be to God." Glory be to God. Yeah. Clearly, only some of them didn't. Only some of them chose, of course, to if you will, be obedient. Most of them were defiant because they were afraid of persecution. They were afraid of the popes. They were afraid of the princes that thought that they were above God, honestly. And of course, if you were defiant unto them, then you were defiant unto God, of course. But we know that to be false, those of us that we study the word of God diligently. Glory be to God. God bless. Stay in tune. More videos will come out.